Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for tonight's webinar. This is our Q&A question and answer session for hopeful adoptive parents. We're glad that you are with us, and we are excited to answer the questions that you have on your minds and hearts. And my name is Kim King. I'm one of the adoptive family coordinators here at Lifetime, co-hosting with Libby Deniston, another one of Lifetime's coordinators. And we invite you to fill out your free application online if you have not already done so. If you are new to starting to get to know us here at Lifetime, the application is free online at lifetimeadoption.com/apply. And with respect to applications for adoption, it is a pretty streamlined application. We will look at everything as a whole and let you know if we can explore further, and we will let you know if we have more questions and everything. So it's a great way to open up that conversation with us, share a little bit about yourself with us, as well as what you're looking for in your adoption. So if you've not already done that, it is a great opportunity to start that conversation with us. Fill out the application online at lifetimeadoption.com/apply. And if you do fill it out this evening, then we will be able to begin processing that in the morning. And we normally have a reply for adoptive parent applications within 1 to 5 business days. But you're always welcome to call or email us to check in on things. If you do have some questions that don't end up getting answered here on our live Q&A session, then you can always email your coordinator with those after the broadcast, or you can, if you're not sure who your coordinator is, you can email those in general to adopt@lifetimeadoption.com, and we will get that question to a coordinator who can explore further and answer your question for you. You can also reach us by phone at 1-800-923-6784. And if you are already getting to know us and you have not yet joined us on Facebook, I would definitely recommend joining us on Facebook, because it is a great, very positive, uplifting community where people share lots of tips and pointers, and you get to see the different experiences as families begin their adoption process all the way through to the completion, when they sometimes share updates with us, which we love. Our Facebook page is online at facebook.com/open.adoption, and you can link to any of our social media pages through our main website, lifetimeadoption.com. So Libby, thank you for setting up tonight's broadcast for our Q&A session.
Thanks, Kim. That was a mouthful. And it might sound like a lot. I was trying to follow along and type in some links. For those of you who are connected online, you can just click those easily too. And I was going to actually share, I've had a few questions recently from both people already working with Lifetime and also people not working with Lifetime, asking how they can find previous webinars like tonight's. So we typically always air webinars live the first time, but we know that not everyone has a schedule that fits in with webinar time slots, and so we record them, and most of them end up getting posted. Now, if you're already working with Lifetime, or if you're starting to explore Lifetime, it's good for you to know this too. But we actually have a whole private membership site just for people who are waiting with Lifetime. And there may even be webinars in there that aren't available to the general public. So families who are contracted with Lifetime within our program, they have access to more webinars. But you know, don't worry if you're not yet part of the program. You can still find a ton of webinar recordings at adoptionwebinar.com, and those are. I've just been so encouraged lately, Kim. I think I've been getting a lot of emails from people listening to webinars just saying not only how helpful they are, but just to feel like they're not alone, to be validated in the process where they're at, moving towards adoption or just thinking about it, and to know other people have been where they are today, but also that they don't have to feel so overwhelmed and fuzzy about all there is to learn and to know and to understand about completing a successful adoption. So webinars really can help kind of chunk that out, and that's one of the reasons that we love these Q&As, and Kim and I used to only offer these once in a while, and we started realizing how much people craved them, because really you can learn about a variety of topics in one sitting tonight, and so we really want to encourage your questions. And like Kim said earlier, if you have a question, and maybe you're not even really sure how to answer it, ask it, we're usually pretty good at kind of piecing together what you're trying to say, and we can put that topic up. But also, if you're not sure if it's a question that fits well for the webinar platform, type it in anyways, because it helps us to know where you're at, what information we might need to work on for future webinars, but also we're usually pretty good at multitasking. Kim and I do our best, and we try and at least get you a little bit of direction during our live webinar tonight. Even if we don't address your question on air, we may be typing with you behind the scenes. So, Kim, I also wanted to start off, we got a great question earlier from, actually I saw them pop up, so I'm glad to see them, but we got a great question earlier, just kind of plan ahead. They said, we have this question for a webinar, and I thought, well, this is kind of a fun place to start, because usually when we do these Q&A webinars, they start out pretty basic, you know, sort of how do I get started with Lifetime, or what's a home study. But this one jumps right into, I'm already picturing the day that I get to bring my baby home, and I want to learn what to expect on that day. And so let's start off with this question from Eric and Kelly that just says, if we need to fly to meet our baby, will we need to hold the baby for the flight and check a car seat, or will we need a car seat on the plane and to purchase an extra seat? And so, Kim, what's been your experience with that, with people flying to bring newborn home after adoption?
I, as an experienced parent flying with an infant multiple times, I would recommend going ahead and purchasing a ticket for the infant so you can have that space right next to you that is dedicated to the child, and you can have their car seat there for them to sleep in, which can give your arms a little rest depending on how long the flight is. It's a safer way to be able to kind of nod off and take a nap maybe for an hour if possible, but also it's a really it's going to sound a little odd, but it is a nice thing to have that spot to change a diaper in. If you end up having some sort of major, I'm not going to say malfunction, but a major event, let's say, which I have experienced. We just have a listener chiming in saying car seats need to be airplane approved, and not all are. I think that is a great tip to look into whether or not the car seat that you're planning to have for your child is airplane approved. You know, I do recommend having your child's car seat and having a seat for them, but it's not always required. Sometimes airlines will allow parents to have their child sit in their lap during the flight under a certain age. Pretty much infants only do not have to have their own ticket for every airline. So you can just explore that with the airline you're considering. But I would recommend, if at all possible, to have a seat for the child, because it will give you that extra leeway. If you are traveling back as a couple, then you practically have a whole row to yourself, which is nice. For landing and takeoff, I recommend doing some feeding so that will help with the ear pressure in the infant. Sometimes people wonder, can a newborn really fly on an airplane? Doesn't that cause problems? I have not had any challenges with flying with an infant, but I would make sure that I am feeding the infant during landing and takeoff, as the altitude is doing a major shift, and that child's ears may start to plug up, and that's going to cause them to cry for sure. If you can get them sleeping during landing and taking off, even better, but we can't always orchestrate that.
Yeah. Don't whip out the rum or whiskey and rub it on the gums or something. But
depends on where you're from, I guess.
It made me think there's a couple factors that might also help you decide, because I would say it's sort of family by family too. Some people might think, no, I'm all into baby wearing, I don't want to let go of that child if I don't have to. And if it's only an hour flight, you might be fine with that. If it's a 5-hour flight or something, you may need different arrangements. I love that you brought up just even needing the extra space, even if you don't bring that car seat on, that just, especially if you're new to flying with a newborn or even just new to parenthood, you might feel a little clumsy about all the gear you think you need to have, or just how am I changing or whatever, and maybe having that little extra space to re-swaddle a baby. But also, if you adopt, say, a 9-month-old or an 18-month-old, or certainly if you adopt a child over 2, you have to have a seat for them. So there's also that factor too. How old is the child you're adopting? But we did get some feedback here from one mom in the audience that says, just keep in mind that the car seat also needs to be airline approved, and not all of them are. So I could see that, because some car seats, I would imagine, like the kind that you keep, that you don't take out of your car and carry around in the grocery store or Target with your newborn, the kind that just stay in the car, might be a little too bulky to set up on an airline. So you might need to investigate that a little bit too, just whether or not your car seat will even be allowed on the plane.
And you're going to need your car seat anyway to get to the airport and to leave the airport. So if you're not paying for a ticket for the child, you're planning to hold the child, and Libby, you made a great point. If it's a short flight, then you don't really need to be. See, I'm envisioning my experience of going coast to coast, East Coast to West Coast back in the day when I was flying with an infant. So for me, that's at least a 6-hour time frame on an airplane. It can be quite sweaty. It can be quite messy. It can be quite stressful. And I would say I had positive experiences. But you can always gate check your car seat. So just keep the infant in the car seat and stroller all the way to the gate, and then once you get there, then you leave your stroller and your car seat right there, and they whisk it off to some unknown place in the airplane, and then it's waiting for you when you get off. Of course, remove the child first so that they can be in the cabin with you. That's a joke.
Yeah. You don't want to pack them under there when the dog crazy.
Right. They don't really do that on airlines.
Well, when this question came up, it reminded me of a webinar that we actually did last year, almost about this time, a little less than a year ago, and it was packed with tips for traveling for adoption. And it had tips not only from us at Lifetime and what we know may be required or what has worked for other families, but also tips from families who have recently traveled. We shared as many as we could, testimonies and quotes and feedback from other adoptive parents who had to travel, whether they drove or whether they flew, and whether it was local or across the country. So that was a helpful resource. I think a lot of people really found it insightful, because it is easy to get bogged down with, what do I have to do right now to get started, and how do I meet just that point of match, point of this is going to take me to the baby I'm longing for. But it is also really, really important to envision those moments of, I'm holding my baby and I'm taking him or her home. So Kim, you and I we talked about this earlier, and the webinar that we're referring to, if you're already working with Lifetime, you have access to it in your membership site. But if you're not yet working with Lifetime, we can give you some special access if you write to, Kim, should we just do your email and keep it easy here?
Sure.
Yeah, if you email kim@lifetimeadoption.com and put in the subject line travel webinar or something like that, so she knows for sure, we would love to be able to get you that webinar to learn a little bit more about what to expect, how to plan. It's also fun to dream. It's like anyone who's expecting a child, whether biologically or through adoption, it's really important to, Marty would speak a lot about keeping her eye on that dream ahead. And picturing that baby coming home, because that also keeps your spirits up. Now you have to, I would say, whether you're already waiting to adopt or you're moving towards starting the adoption process, it's important also to just know yourself, and when it turns from I'm staying prepared and focused on my dream into obsession mode where you constantly are thinking about it and it's starting to drag you down, so kind of keep yourself in check, keep yourself accountable for what works for you. But I think it's very healthy and helpful for adoptive parents to get excited about picturing that moment of, okay, so what am I going to do when I finally get clearance to bring that baby home and I've got to get on an airplane to do it? A good follow-up question, I think we talked about this in the webinar, but Kim, if you wanted to talk a little bit, maybe even about your experience. I don't know if you traveled with your baby as a newborn, but sometimes an airline might require a doctor approval of the newborn to fly. Is that correct?
I'm not really sure, so I would recommend that you speak with a physician. Also, a lot has changed since my days of toting an infant around. She was born in 2002, so a lot has definitely changed since then. We found out we were expecting her shortly before September 11th, 9/11. So a lot has changed since then. So I would definitely recommend checking with your physician. Like I mentioned before, I didn't even know that some car seats were not airline approved. So I would recommend checking on all those things. And this is such a great reason, an example of why we come together in these formats in this forum, because even, you know, the listeners who are here to gain information from us are giving information that we can share with the group.
Yeah, we had this great tip here that just said, oh, we flew from Hawaii to Michigan with a 1.5-year-old. Don't stress about what others think of you on planes. Just do what you need to make that baby happy.
And regardless of how many decades have gone by.
Without a child, well, yeah, I was going to say, you're probably putting thoughts into other people's heads that are harsher than what they're actually thinking. So some of us might actually be thinking, oh, you poor mom, like that baby has cried the whole time and is right in your ear and I'm 5 feet back. You know, so we're not always thinking bad things. We just might be a little worried for you.
Well, and there is also another tip that, you know, people may rather hear a mother singing to her baby or reciting a nursery rhyme over and over or making funny baby sounds to the baby versus, you know, if you have that option to keep your baby from crying, keep them from being upset, great. Don't be shy about that, because the alternative is maybe they start crying if you don't. But even if they start crying, everyone was a baby once. We all cry. It's so easy to forget that and stare in judgment at others. So hopefully if you are up and about with a crying infant and just feeling that stress and having one of those sweaty moments that you are sure to encounter as a new parent, hopefully you can meet the eyes of someone else who really has empathy, and that will hopefully bolster your confidence in that moment.
And if any of you have friends that you know have flown, you know, with a newborn or with an older baby, just ask them for tips. Parents love giving other parents tips. So I'm sure you'll even get some ideas that other people may never even thought to share on a webinar, for instance, or write in a book. But here's another question here, kind of on the same topic, but a little bit different. This is still traveling with baby, but when it comes to waiting for clearance to go home, let me see if I can make sense of this question here. Does the waiver for the baby to fly need to be signed before leaving the hospital, even if you can't leave the state for a while? There's a few different ways that could go.
Yes, and every state has different requirements or a form that needs to be addressed by whomever is doing your legal work for the baby to go home from the hospital with you. We just have to have you follow any policies or laws that pertain to your adoption, and this varies greatly from state to state, even hospital to hospital as far as policy. And that is why we refer you to the right person for your legal work once you are matched, so you can get some of these questions answered and know that they are experienced in working in similar circumstances to your adoption, and they are tried and true, and they will take care of all of those kinds of things. Once the baby has left the hospital, typically you're still waiting in that state for clearance, and I want to mention this because it's not like a newborn baby is instantly going to be on an airplane. You're just going to be staying in that state for a little while, usually 7 to 10 business days before the baby can travel across state lines. And in the meantime, you might decide you're going to rent a car and drive home. You might find that there's really no rush. The rush was to get there. And you certainly didn't know how long you'd be there and how quickly you could come back, so you probably don't have a set-in-stone return flight scheduled, so you may have the option of driving back at your leisure, Maybe go ahead and start your maternity and paternity leave and just take your time coming home, or you might just want to get it over with and just hop on that flight and just go through those
Yeah.
moments of traveling with your baby for the first time on an airplane.
It's so important just to remember not to jump the gun and think, oh, my child's birth mother signed all the waivers and my pediatrician has approved this baby to travel home and everything's good, and then to just assume you can go. You really need to wait for that clearance and that confirmation from your attorney, because you could always, I would just hate to see any family risk having to turn around or compromise the adoption altogether. That even goes for families where sometimes it's tempting. I would say this is a more tempting situation when you adopt a child out of state, but it's, say, just over state line from where you live, and it could even only be a couple hours from where you live because you live close to that state line. You still need to wait for clearance. Now, what some people have done is gone and found a place to stay right at the state line so that they're even closer to home once they get clearance. But it's just so important to just not assume and to get total confirmation from your attorney that everything is good to take baby home and that there's nothing that could stand in your way of finalizing that adoption when the time comes. So good. Let's see here. We had a question about...
There was a... Go ahead.
Go for it. No, go for it.
So we have a question. It says, I read about adoptive mothers breastfeeding. Would you recommend those of us waiting to adopt to look into lactation consultants? And we actually have recently released a new kit you can purchase, and it's all about how to breastfeed your infant who came to you through adoption. And this was something that was on Marty's heart for many years, decades really, and she has seen this project through to completion. It is now available for adoptive parents. And so when I saw this question, I was actually thinking about this when I was talking about the landing and takeoff. Not all adoptive parents realize you can either breastfeed or stimulate breastfeeding and have that bonding. So you could do that instead of feeding a bottle or giving a pacifier or something. But how to get that kit about adoptive breastfeeding is it's online at your it's at www.guidetoadoptivebreastfeeding.com. And while I was reading that question, I found the site, and I'm going to share it with you who are on the webinar. I just shared it with you, a link to that. I was ready. I didn't want it to pop out too soon because that might seem like, well, this is random, a random topic. But guidetoadoptivebreastfeeding.com. So hopefully that will help you as you explore the possibilities of bonding through breastfeeding, something that you may have thought was not going to be in your future, but that you can hopefully get some tools on how to make that possible for you and your new infant.
And some
I would recommend a lactation consultant if you are going to be lactating. Adoptive breastfeeding does not always include lactating. So you can explore that further with your physician, read the information in the kit, and look at what your options are from there.
Exactly. I was going to say there's so much more to that topic, but I would say, if you do want to consult with a professional about that, with someone who's an experienced lactation expert, or even a doctor who could help you find resources or direction, to realize that it's more than just the obvious. We even had another tip come in that just said, also there are milk banks that can help adoptive parents out too, if that's something on your heart. But I just always like to add to this, because I've had this come up before. If you are planning any kind of breastfeeding the child you adopt, to remember to stay a little bit flexible, because especially no matter how old the baby is, whether it's newborn or a couple months old or something like that, you still need to honor and respect that this baby also has belonged to this biological mother, the birth mother, and that especially if you're at a hospital, sometimes hospitals don't like adoptive parents to step in and start nursing because there's, they like to keep everything tidy and as risk-free as possible, so they don't want to, they don't necessarily know your health and how you're feeding the baby, so they may say, you know, you can't do that here. And don't get upset. You can always do that once the baby is in your care. So it's not a very long time that you're usually pending, waiting until you're just a mom. But you just want to honor that there are more people involved than just, say, giving birth and having a nurse come in and teach you how to breastfeed. But it's good to think about now. And it's going to be a very, very personal decision as to what's right for you when you start preparing for that. Some adopted moms like to wait until they know for sure that they have a match coming. Other moms like to plan ahead while they're just waiting for that match to come. So there's really, I wouldn't say a right answer. You really have to just know yourself and your own limitations, and also your time too, how much time you want to devote into preparing, but also waiting to use what you've learned. And so you're not getting discouraged, or you're not, just getting frustrated health-wise either. But that's a great topic, and I love that you brought up that resource too. And I know that Marty actually spoke to that in a couple webinars earlier this year about bonding, and that's a topic that continues to have a lot of interest. So we may have more webinars on that in the future. So I wrote it down here as a little reminder. Let's see here. Kim, I wanted to talk about, there was a question that sometimes I think it's a very honest question, and I think that it's good to talk about what you're doing when you are starting an adoption process. And this question says, is there a guarantee of adoption once we start up with Lifetime? And I think it's important, no matter who you decide to work with and partner with in your adoption journey, to realize that there's so much more going on in any adoption process than just one baby, one family, one birth mother. That essentially, when you are going through the process to adopt, the adoption professional that you're working with is supporting all of the potential women who could become your child's birth mother, all of the women who are thinking about adoption, helping them learn about you, helping them learn about what to expect so that they can decide for themselves if that's the right path, if that's the direction they want to go. And that ultimately what you want to do is work with professionals who are having adoptions that are happening all the time and that are working with numerous potential birth mothers, numerous women who are considering adoption at any given time. So sometimes, I've worked with families that come to me and say, I was working with a more local place, and then I realized that they really only get about, 1 or 2 calls a month of women just thinking about adoption, which means in the end they're only doing maybe 1 or 2 adoptions a year. And so, yeah, maybe they only have 15 families, to choose from, but when there's only 2 adoptions a year, I mean, how does that pan out? Versus, Lifetime, at any given time, we're in communication with about 300 women or more who are thinking about adoption. And at any time, like I'm on call tonight, after tonight's webinar, we have a 24-hour hotline. You want to find out what kind of support is offered to these women. Are you available when they're ready to talk? Because let me just say, lately, it seems like a lot of women are ready to talk after dinner time. So when you're winding down at night is when these potential birth mothers are ramping up to start learning about you. And so we're getting calls at all hours of the day. We're getting emails and texts and live chats online from women who are thinking about it, but they're not always just thinking about it. Sometimes they've been stewing on that information for a while, and then they finally call because they're ready to move forward. So you want to know when you're choosing someone to work with, are you in regular contact with women who are actually thinking about adoption? And to find out, what does that look like for me? But also, it's so important, I think, to keep perspective. Actually, today we had an adoption story video popped up on our Facebook post with one of the women that we helped. And it's so valuable, I think, to remember everything that these women are going through just to get to you. And so to think of a guaranteed adoption is kind of, I understand what adoptive parents want to hear with that, but I think it kind of, sometimes that word or that concept can easily undermine everything that has to happen for you to become parents through adoption. And so it's good to learn about adoption from the side of the birth mothers too, and just find out, what is this like for them? What questions are they asking to get to me? And then to know that by the time she does get to you, it's been completely her choice and that you are a blessing to her. And you might even be surprised. I've heard this so much, Kim, you and I both, we've heard all these beautiful adoption stories, but it continues to warm my heart every time I hear an adoptive parent say, I don't even know how we could thank our son's birth mom, our daughter's birth mother. There's just no words, there's no gift that appropriately expresses how grateful we are to be parents to her baby. But then how surprised they are when they get that kind of gratitude back from that child's birth mom, because you were there for her and you continue to be there for her baby. So it's really a beautiful full circle effect, but you have to, as much as you're going through to get to this process and get ready, also know that there's a whole other process going on the other side, and eventually I'm picturing circles that are overlapping, Kim. Eventually the circle that you're in is going to overlap with the circle that birth mother's in, and that's when your match will come together for the right reasons.
Yes, and when you do have that match, or you're in the process of establishing that match, when Lifetime calls to say we have a birth mom who is interested in you, there are sometimes things that are done or not done that make or break that family's ability to move forward. A family has to have decided, I'm going to say yes to a birth mom that matches all my preferences, and as soon as one has chosen me or is interested in me, I'm a yes on that. We've already done all the pre-planning. We have our home study done. It's kept up to date. We haven't moved without telling Lifetime. We haven't added a child or children without telling Lifetime. So when a birth mom is interested in us, we know she's basing her interest on accurate information. We are paper ready, and in our hearts, we are ready to say yes to that birth mom. And we're just jumping at the chance. And in the beginning, it can be really easy to think, well, who in the world would get that far and then say no to a birth mom? Or who in the world would plan this adoption and get everything moving forward and then not keep their home study up to date? Well, believe me, there are people who do fall into those categories of missing adoption opportunities. So that just kind of puts a damper on the whole thing, not just for you, a damper, but a damper for the staff that is excited to share with you we have this adoption opportunity for you. And we can only imagine that the majority of our families have had a multi-year journey that has led them to this point of adoption, and now we finally have that baby for them. And so we're looking for a yes in response. We're looking for a yes, this is what we've been waiting for, just tell us what to do next. But those calls don't always end that way when we call to present a birth mom. And we also, it's very important, I know, Libby, this has a special place in all of our hearts here at Lifetime, not only to help meet the needs of our adoptive parents, but also to spare a potential birth mom the trauma of being personally rejected by an adoptive parent, or feel that her child is being rejected if they say no to her. If they just didn't stay prepared and she had her heart set on them and now she has to start all over again. That's really quite devastating and can even cause a loss of that adoption opportunity. So just remember that in the back of your mind, that you want to be one of those families that is prepared and is able to say yes. Now we work with you to establish these preferences. You're not on your own. If you're one of Lifetime's families, you might have felt that we were really kind of picking around at lots of questions before we agreed to offer to assist in your adoption. If you are one of Lifetime's families, you had to go through steps and you were evaluated. We looked at everything as a whole so that we would only offer to assist you if we are confident you'll be successful. But at the same time, it does require a partnership. And we talk about this a lot on our private webinars, especially after something has happened where these guidelines were not followed. But I'm glad that we have this opportunity to share a little bit about this aspect of adoption planning on our open Q&A session. So is there a guarantee? We cannot provide a promise that you're going to hire Lifetime and we're going to give you a baby in return. Buying a baby is totally illegal and unethical, so we could never make that promise. But we can do our part to select a family that we are confident will be successful, and you can do your part to follow the program so that we're all working together, and it's only a matter of time before your adoption is complete.
Right, and I love that you said that, and the word commitment came to my mind, because it really is a joint commitment that Lifetime, the staff at Lifetime is pretty passionate about seeing people succeed with their adoption goal. Patty and I just did a webinar. She's one of our adoptive family coordinators, and we just did a webinar, I think it was last week, and we talked about the bell that we ring when babies are born and matches are made and families get to go home with their babies, and it's not like a little ding ding I'm at the counter bell. It's like a big old she said it was off a train or something like that, like a big old bell, and they make noise in that office, and they say, hey, this is something to celebrate because we get to know all of you. There was a great question here that just said, we want to know what is the best way to market or promote our adoption profile, and that's a huge part of what Lifetime is doing for our adopted families, is to bring out a strong presentation of you and the life that you're not only living right now, but the life that you have room to add a child to, and what that's going to look like for that child growing up. And we have our hands in so many different buckets to try and get all of our adoptive parents out and available to these women who are searching for them, because there are real-life women looking for adoptive parents, willingly searching out adoptive parents and considering adoption with very serious hearts. But there's almost too much for me to say to answer just a simple, what's the best way to market ourselves for adoption? I mean,
well, if you've hired Lifetime,
I would say honesty and authenticity counts, but also listening,
definitely.
And listening to the person who's working with the birth mother that you want to match with. So what that means is, Lifetime has built our guidelines for our contracted families based on what we are seeing with the women who are calling us. And then there may be other professionals who base their profile guidelines off of the kind of situations and women that they are seeing. So a good example of this I always think of is, Lifetime is heavily online based, and more the women calling us are actually looking for profiles to be emailed, or can you text me a link, or can I look at this online? And we are still mailing out physical profiles, but they want to see videos, and they want to have a little more interaction before they get to talk with you one-on-one, whereas there may still be some adoption professionals who maybe get more foot traffic. So if you have foot traffic, then you probably have a lot more physical things there for her to touch and flip through when she visits your office. You're not just handing her an iPad and saying go for it, but so that may change. You have to listen to what your adoption professional is telling you is going to work for the women who are reaching out to them for help. So that's sort of as deep as I can go into that, because that is a huge part of what Lifetime does, is to help you figure out the best way to reach the women that you are hoping to match with, to move towards the right match. And Kim, you brought up something that made me want to add to that guarantee question. Just to emphasize, it really is about the right match. In fact, we are having an adoption story next week, and it's only open to a private audience because of the confidential nature of the story and the people involved. But I was just reminded the other day when I was speaking with these guests, and it's an adopted mom and a birth mother who are going to come on and talk about what open adoption looks like to them. But this birth mother shared that, and she kind of joked. She said, oh, Lifetime worked with me a long time before I got to David and Ann. And she kind of laughed like, oh, I must have been such trouble. And I just reassured her. I said, that is the blessing with adoption today, is there's no rush, there's no pressure. Nobody's saying you have to do this. We are saying when you decide that this is what you want to do, we're here for you. And so she actually said, and I know she'll talk about this next week, but it's such a good reminder because she said, you know, I looked at their profile for about a month or more before I ever talked to them. And I think that that is key right there into knowing that when you think about is an adoption guaranteed or how do I best market myself, you still have to take into consideration that there are some things that you may never be able to gauge what's happening until the moment that the one specific birth mother chooses to take that next step with you. So that family was waiting all that time, not knowing that for over a month their profile was being looked at every night and thought about very seriously until that birth mother got the nerve to actually talk to them and get a match started. So those are all things that Lifetime takes into consideration in the way that we support birth mothers and in the way that we help support families while they're waiting so that they are ready. Like you said, Kim, I love that you just really emphasized that the readiness cannot be underestimated, and it is so appreciated, not only by the people who are helping you adopt, but also that birth mother that's choosing.
Yes, and maybe we can put a shout out there right now. If you have moved and haven't let Lifetime know, if you're thinking that there might be a move in your future, please, either side of the coin, haven't moved, thinking about possibly moving, might have a job opportunity somewhere else, please let your coordinator at Lifetime know that immediately, like email her, because that does impact, it impacted a recent possible opportunity for adoption, and we don't want that to impede you know, this journey to your successful adoption, or if there's been any other possible change of circumstance that you are not even sure if this is something we need to know, then just, you know, play it safe and let us know whatever that may be, whether it's a change of job, might have just found out you're pregnant, even though you're choosing adoption and have had several infertility treatments that didn't, you know, weren't successful. Maybe you just found out you're pregnant. Let us know anything like this because that deeply impacts our ability to help these birth moms as well as adoptive parents. Even if you're not ready because now you have something else going on, another bun in the oven, so to speak, it does impact the people around you, like adoptive parents around you and the birth moms. So if there's anything like that you haven't shared with us, take a moment right now and send us an email so that we do have that immediately. And just remember this in the back of your mind. If you do encounter a change like what I've mentioned, please do inform us immediately because it may have a big impact on your adoption possibilities or those opportunities for people around you. I wanted to answer this question.
Well, you were talking about home study, and
Sure.
I was hoping that maybe you could talk about, there were two questions. One about our attorney told us that we should wait until we're actually matched to get the home study done. And then there was another question about we live in a one-bedroom right now to save money for our adoption. Is that going to be a problem getting us approved for a home study?
I would say that most adoptive parents actually live in at least a two-bedroom home if they're adopting their first child. But some exceptions can be made, but you just need to talk with your home study provider. If you are looking only for a newborn and you're not going to be fostering, you're not looking for sibling groups or older children, it's just going to be a single newborn, then a home study provider might be willing to consider that and approve you for a home study. But because they're thinking, well, the baby's going to be with you, and then you have plans to move to a larger apartment or something when the baby is ready to move into their own room, which is usually after at least a few months, maybe 6 months for many families. And if you're a military family, you might only be in a one-bedroom right now because you don't have a child yet, and you have to have the child first before you can get or you have to be expecting the child first before you can get the housing, you know, a larger place sometimes. But talk with a home study provider. They are the only ones that can answer that. They have requirements that they have to follow in your state, and those requirements vary from state to state. So there's no blanket answer for that other than talk to your home study provider. I think it's wonderful that you are willing to stay in a smaller space in order to put more toward your adoption fund. I commend you on that. You know, sometimes the journey to adoption includes a challenging financial piece to overcome. So that is great that you are really putting everything you can toward your adoption. And as far as the home studying, when to get it done, when you know that you're financially and emotionally and physically ready to adopt, you should have that home study done like yesterday. Because you are emotionally, financially, and physically ready to adopt, that means if you get an adoption opportunity, you're going to want to say yes and not have to say no because your home study is going to be 2 months out or a few weeks out. Even if you paid to get it expedited, it still takes time and attention away from focusing on that adoption match with that birth mom and child that you're now diverting to getting the adoption home study done in a hurry. So we always recommend that families do go ahead and have their home study started at least by the time they are in the first few weeks of starting their program with us. But if people are still exploring, not sure who they're going to hire, not sure what they're looking for in their adoption yet, then maybe it's a little early to start that. But yes, if you're financially, emotionally, and physically ready to adopt, there's no better time than now to get that home study done. I mean, you never know if someone might contact you through social media, through a friend of a friend, through a high school reunion and their niece is pregnant, and you want to jump at that opportunity. So make sure you have that done ASAP.
I have heard that before. And sometimes it goes the other way too. You may already have a home study done, but then even the home study worker might say, we'll have time to update this once you're matched. But what if you get matched with a last-minute opportunity, like baby was born 4 hours ago and we need you here yesterday? You're not going to have time to update that home study, especially if it's out of state. So sometimes those home study providers may be more familiar with a different type of adoption, or maybe even more local adoptions where they know, well, you can bring this baby into your life and we can just work on updates and we're good. But it's so important, especially at Lifetime, since we work with so many different state laws, that you not let anything lapse or remain incomplete when it comes to that home study. And I keep going back to this, but earlier this year I had this new adopted mom that she and her husband, they just, they did all that home study process, and the whole time they weren't stubborn about it, but at the same time they were kind of like probably a lot of you would identify with, like, oh my gosh, really, we have to do this for it, and just some of the things that adoptive parents go through to get ready. But they did everything, and then she said to me, while we were doing that, and then even while we waited to be chosen, it was sort of like, it felt like a lot of work for nothing much is happening. But boy, did that home study come into play once we had our son in arms at the hospital. And she said, I am so grateful that we didn't have to backtrack or be working on any of that at the same time that we were in all those sensitive moments and all those joyful moments of meeting our son. And she said, I didn't realize how important it was, because that home study gets whipped out by the state, by the attorneys in the state where baby's born, and everything is working in motion to get you home safely. So it's, like Kim said earlier, it's really about a partnership, and there unfortunately have been adoptive parents at Lifetime, and I know outside of Lifetime, that don't keep the home study current or even finished, and they risk their adoptions. There's always a little bit more to stories where there might be failed adoptions than you might think. Sometimes it has to do with people that just didn't get what they needed to get done, completed. But Kim, I want to try and fit in a few more questions here as we have just burned through this hour. It's great. See, there was one earlier about having children and worrying about being a little bit older than average, or whether or not they would be desirable to a birth mother if they already have kids in their home. I saw that.
I wanted to answer that. Thank you for bringing that up. I see that question right here. And I'm going to frame this question too after we read it. It says, I see most birth mothers are looking for young childless couples. What has been your experience or success with placing children with older couples? My husband and I are 47. Here's the frame. We don't consider 47 to be older. You're still in the average range of adoptive parents that we assist and place newborns with on a regular basis. So yes, we have a high success rate with helping adoptive parents who are in your age category, and we don't see that to be a concern in and of itself. Now, remember I said earlier in the webinar, we look at everything as a whole. So, you know, we want to make sure that we are seeing plenty of birth moms within what you're looking for and what you're open to in your adoption who are requesting and placing with families similar to yours. So age is just one of many things we look at. We also look at the adoptive parent's ability to show that they have a healthy, active lifestyle, or at least have some semblance of having a healthy, natural life expectancy. So those are things we look at as well. Preferences, whether or not there are other children. Many of our adoptive parents are already parenting a child. Maybe they are experiencing secondary infertility, or maybe one spouse brought a child into the relationship, into the marriage from a prior marriage. There are many reasons why adoptive parents are already parenting a biological child or through adoption and are now waiting to be chosen by a birth mom for a new child to come help them grow their family. So I actually do not see having a child or maybe even one or two children ever as being a concern. Even a family with 3 children can be successful, but we want to see what they're open to and what else can we learn about them that we can help them pull out and present in a profile so that it's likely they'll get chosen by a birth mom that's coming to us here at Lifetime. Now, whenever adoptive parents have a concern about their ages, I usually let them know whether or not they should really be concerned. Most people are concerned about their ages, either because they think they're young or they think they're too old. Most of the times, they are wrong. The ones who aren't concerned are usually the ones that should be. But like a 21-year-old, you know, usually they're not too concerned as to whether or not they can adopt. They're just here to adopt.
Well, I have a question about am I too young to adopt? Sometimes that is a common question. So, but I love that you're just talking about it's really about what that birth mom's looking for, but also carrying a balance too. Those of you who have researched a lot of different adoption places, you may have noticed some professionals carry a big variety of families. Others may carry, or may work with a certain type of family, or it may just seem like they take everybody in and it's just like overloaded. Lifetime really works hard to have a balance so that that variety is present, so that when a birth mother calls us, she's not just getting, just 3 profiles to choose from that all are the same kinds of families, but that it's truly a choice, and that might mean she's looking at a dozen profiles or 25 profiles, or I know this might freak a lot of you out, but sometimes she might receive 50 profiles or something like that. Honestly, I'm the type of person, Kim, I always have thought this as long as I've been here. Even if it was 100 profiles, I would want to look through every single family that was an option for me, because I would wonder, didn't I see? What might I have missed? But there are other women who say, Libby, it overwhelms me just to even think about getting this packet. Can you narrow it down to 10? And so we'll do that for her. It's really what works for her. But so that's what, when Kim was talking about looking at things as a whole, we are taking into consideration that it just wouldn't make much sense to bring in every and any type of adoptive family, because we would hate to see you wait excessively, but also it's not going to help women who are choosing adoption if they ask for a certain type of family and all we keep showing them is the opposite of what they asked for.
Yeah.
So
well, and
goes both
another
ways.
thing is,
we had a great question here that said, I actually feel like if I were a birth mom, I'd want a more mature adoptive couple because they would have more experience and possible stability. And then there's other people who might think, Heather loves to tell the story, she's on here at Lifetime, of how just this year we had what we refer to as the menopause baby. We had a woman in her very late 40s, surprised to become pregnant, didn't think that she was even able to, already raised her children, they were in college. She and her husband, who is the baby's father, chose adoptive parents who were younger than them because they reminded them of how they were when they started out with babies. So that's what worked for her. So that's what I love. I love seeing all these matches come together because it's, sometimes they're unexpected, and then other times it's just really, we can't always predict and force a match. It has to be the right fit, and that's going to be you standing out for who you are. I just was in contact yesterday with one of Lifetime's adopted parents, Mandy. She shared her story a couple times on webinars in the last year, and they had biological children who were older. You know, one I think is graduated or about to graduate high school, and they did worry at times, you know, well, we just feel called to adopt, to grow our family through adoption, and they eventually did, and it's a beautiful match. I couldn't imagine that little boy in any other family. And then other times, like recently we had a private webinar with Kevin and Jess, and they were actually just starting out their family. And so statistically, or stereotypically, I should say, based on especially where this comment started, and I see a lot of birth mothers looking for childless couples, you would have thought that this couple might have been chosen a lot sooner than they were, but they still waited for the right match. So again, it's that balance. And that's what, Kim, can you talk a little bit about what happens when an application comes in? Because I think that's a good place to go here as we wrap up tonight, is what happens when you apply, that it's not about yes, no, that we think you'd be good parents or not, but it's really about what we're looking at, and then what happens the next step when that is when that's brought in.
So once you fill out your application, and you submit it through our website at lifetimeadoption.com/apply, you should receive an automated email with some more information that also acts as a confirmation that your application has been submitted electronically. From there, in the following business day, you will hear from one of our applications coordinators here at Lifetime, or maybe an adoptive family coordinator here at Lifetime, who is calling you to let you know, hey, we officially received your application. It is being processed by a human, not just an automated system. We are actually setting things up to send your file to be reviewed. You might receive a phone call or an email to that effect. And then within 1 to 5 business days during that time frame, your application is sent through a review process where everything is looked at in comparison with what openings we currently have here at Lifetime. So our ability to offer to assist in your adoption is based in part on things that have to do with you. Some things you can control, some things you cannot control, but it's not only about your preferences and dynamics. It's also about who is already here with us, what adoptions are we completing, what kind of families are we now looking for, or what do we need for our program to meet certain needs of birth moms. So if we say, I'm sorry, we just can't offer to assist in your adoption, it's because we have a limited ability to meet the needs that you've shared with us. Now at that point, if you're curious and want to know, hey, is there anything that I could change, you're welcome to reach out to us, and we might say, well, you know, we saw in your application you've said yes only to full Asian, and that's just really probably the least likely race that we ever see in our program, so we just didn't feel confident that we would even have that adoption, let alone match everything else, and then she picks you over other families, and that's the only opportunity you might have ever had to be chosen by a birth mom if you're open only to full Asian, which we see maybe once every couple of years, if that. So, and that's not even a 1% of the adoptions we complete yearly, which is about 120 to 140 adoptions a year. So that's the way we're looking at it. Again, like Libby said, it's not about your ability to be great parents, and it's not even about your ability to complete a successful adoption or get chosen by a birth mom. It's also just about our ability to meet your needs, and we want to be cautious in making commitments to families because we want to follow through with that and see you be successful now that you're with us once you get down through the process. So I hope that that helps you just kind of take the pressure off when you're filling out the application. You know, you do have control over your preferences. You don't have control over your age or how many children you have, how long you've been married, what state you live in, etc. So just, you know, be yourself in the application and let things fall where they fall. If it is a fit, great, but we don't want to force anything to where it's unhealthy for you to pursue your adoption here. It may not have been wise. So just keep all that in mind as you fill it out at lifetimeadoption.com/apply, and you are always welcome at any stage in the process. We have an open door policy that whenever you have updates, questions, or things you're just wondering about and want to mull over with us, call us or email us. The number is 1-800-923-6784. You can email your coordinator directly, but if you don't have one yet, you can email us in general at adopt@lifetimeadoption.com, and we'll connect you with a coordinator. And of course, make sure that you are following on Facebook at facebook.com/open.adoption. So we want to thank you all for being with us and staying the course throughout this whole hour where we covered so many different topics, and we appreciate your contributions as well.
Absolutely. I was just typing some comments back to people that had asked these questions and brought up these great topics. So we really do appreciate all of your participation tonight. And we do invite your questions. If you need more information or you want to speak one-on-one with us, just remember, if you're already working with Lifetime, to let your coordinator know what those questions or your feedback or maybe requests for more information on future webinars might be. You can always write to your own coordinator directly. Got a little frog in my throat there, Kim. But then also, if you don't have a coordinator at Lifetime, you can just reach out to us and connect. I got a couple emails today that I wasn't even sure, you know, who might be the best one to help, and I pointed them one way, and we all got it taken care of, because we do very much talk to each other and keep each other in the loop around here. And it's just important to us that if you feel called to adopt, that we get you on the right path, whether that's from Lifetime or that we are just a stepping stone to the ultimate path that you're heading towards to reach your baby. So watch your email. We have National Adoption Awareness Month is the month of November, and so we're working on some webinars to celebrate that. And we just hope that you're having a great autumn season so far, and that you're looking forward to a good weekend, and that we get to meet with you again here soon. So Kim, thanks for joining us this evening. Is there anything you want to add?
Thank you, Libby. No, I think you've covered everything. I hope you all have a great evening, and we will be talking with you again soon.
Okay, have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.